I can't believe I have to say this. I can't believe I have to make this video. So this is Dr. Mike, and Dr. Mike has a hot take on Dr. Steven Gundry. Let's just take a look at it. Brought to you by this cat, born under the TI-333 constellation. Meow.
I can't believe I would have to make a video like this.
A health guru claimed puffing on cigarettes is linked to longer living, but now he's trying to extinguish the controversy.
You guys hear this on Dr. Mike's podcast?
Dr. Steven Gundry appeared on the Checkup podcast with Dr. Mike and claimed smoking cigarettes was linked to longer living.
Actually, let me stop you right there.
And in one case, it may actually be. Find out more. Dr. Mike agrees.
Probably it's because he smoked that he's doing so well.
Dr. Gundry.
And by the way, this is not a video in support of smoking, nor are these comments in support of smoking. Not by me, not by Dr. Gundry, not by Dr. Mike. Let's look at this. 1.25 speed.
Sent a cease and desist letter to
Demanding Dr. Mike remove an Instagram clip of the interview posted earlier this month.
You're wrong.
But how?
You are wrong.
Probably appropriate if you do something to do with character assassination and whatnot.
I thought it's pretty common knowledge that smoking is unhealthy and shortens lifespan, but clearly there's a story here to tell, so let's start with
Dr. Gundry agrees.
the podcast. Earlier this year, I had a chance to interview Dr. Steven Gundry, an uber popular cardiothoracic surgeon who became a New York Times best-selling author that makes some pretty controversial nutrition and health claims. I was actually really happy to have him on my show for 2
I don't feel like he does overstate the case, like many great scientists tend to overstate their case at points. Happens to the best, happens to this guy, happens to me, happens to everyone. I tried to catch me on that, but again, it's not great, but you also can't like shut down science on the basis that, well, people do this, so it's like, people should just stop being scientists. It's like, that's just dumb, you know?
reasons. One, every podcast he would go on, first of all, he would get millions of views, but he would make some extreme claim with limited to no scientific backing. And the podcast host, instead of challenging it, or at least approaching it with skepticism, would do the same thing every time.
It's a secret.
It's a secret.
Okay.
There you go.
Wow.
Wow. Gosh.
No, really?
No way. Wow.
It's funny that the guy with 12.2 million subscribers on YouTube is like, ooh, this guy's doing irresponsible commentary on podcasts, when he himself is putting out a rather irresponsible video himself. So, but anyway, let's keep watching. Because I did pre-watch most of this, and man, there's some really shady shenanigans. I don't love it.
This is interesting.
What?
Second, he knew that I disagreed with some of his theories, and yet he was still open to having a debate on those topics. It's pretty rare these days, given that most people...
I want you to take away that, at most, I want you to understand that this guy ain't no better than Dr. Steven Gundry.
People prefer the other kind of interviewer who just oohs and ahs at claims made, especially if it helps their podcast get views. The podcast went pretty much as expected, with one major...
Yeah, that's the thing. When you have a piece of the truth that others don't have yet, you may be saying that it's more relevant than it really is, just because, well, it's new, and it's like, it's hard to know, and you might end up believing it. You might believe it, you know, because this could be all kinds of relevant, and maybe it isn't, actually. Steven Gundry has had a history of autoimmune issues, so there's an easy pathway to extrapolate into areas where that may not be so true what he's talking about. Now, personally, I got my fair share of allergies and stuff, so I appreciate when people take seriously those minority concerns like my own, you know.
Major exception. Several times throughout the interview,
I just want people to listen all around the block, you know? There's plenty good info on all sides, and you don't get to gatekeep that. There are some people who are blatant charlatans, but this is not it, you know? This is just not it.
Dr. Gundry noted that people who lived longer lives could have done so because they smoked cigarettes. I mean, I push back on this pretty
And it could be true. And I did watch that conversation. It's been a while, but I don't recall Dr. Gundry being like recommending smoking at all in that conversation.
Heavily throughout the entire interview. It made no sense to me that a cardiothoracic surgeon who has to know how destructive cigarettes are to our health and lifespans would somehow glorify smoking. To be
And that's not what he was doing, right?
clear, Dr. Gundry
This is just Dr. Mike asserting.
himself even stated that he doesn't recommend people to smoke,
See, that's just like quite contradictory, isn't it?
nor does he smoke himself, so the situation was just really confusing.
It's not actually that confusing when you're curious about the activities of a substance, you know? It's like, yeah, I want people to get curious about this. That's how I feel about Dr. Gundry.
Anyway, during one section towards the end of the interview, we got into a really heated discussion about that very topic. Our team decided to clip that section and make it into a short. And for fear of being disingenuous, we didn't cut any of the dialogue in that section. We started with smoking, we ended with smoking. In fact, here's that clip. You live longer by consuming a high-grain diet in the Leonhardt study. And you're arguing against those things.
And you live longer if you smoke in some of these areas.
But it's not because if you smoke, it's in spite of smoking.
No, you're wrong.
But how?
You are wrong.
You know smoking is pro-inflammatory.
Nicotinic acid is one of the best mitochondrial...
Dr. Gundry, we have to end this conversation.
And by the way, I'll just say, I don't like when Dr. Steven Gundry is like, oh, meat is bad because there's like this one mechanistic pathway that like it could help cancer in your bowels. It's like, but it's not, you know, it might as well not because it really isn't quantified. And if you do intermittent fasting or whatever, it could totally be managed in a way that it will never be a problem, right? So like Dr. Steven Gundry, he does that thing where he knows one mechanistic thing and he knows a lot of mechanistic things. And so he's like, I mean, he's just extrapolating too far.
Doctors.
So I'm just saying, this is really Dr. Mike doing a disservice to all the people who are on the fence about Dr. Steven Gundry.
Studies
Smoking
show
is not
that
good. We need to at least end
British
smoking.
smokers, British doctors who smoke have a 30% less incidence of Parkinson's and
Yeah,
dementia.
because they die of 10 other diseases beforehand. Oh, man. This is...
I feel like Dr. Mike knows that he messed up, that he's like completely unable to engage with the material that he's been presented, which is, there could be a lot of things going on. British doctors who smoke, like that's a very weird subset. Like what are they doing? Like what is going on here? What are they smoking? Tell me more. I would be interested. Like maybe there's something to this, but that doesn't mean you should go smoking. That's not what he said either.
So...
You know, if you clip it like that, it just looks like that's what Dr. Gundry believes, when clearly you weren't willing to hear out where he's going to go with that.
Problematic. Even Dr. Danielle Bellardo, preventive cardiologist, who also joined us on the podcast, was beyond shocked at the statements made.
And that is a problem.
First of all, let's be clear. Smoking is a proven
Like, let him explain himself, and then it becomes clear what he means.
risk factor for cancer and cardiovascular disease.
Exactly.
And is the leading cause of avoidable disease in most industrialized countries. And this translates very clearly to
And Dr. Gundry would agree.
a shorter lifespan. Even in the British doctor study that Dr. Gundry mentions in the clip, confirmed the association between smoking habits and many severe diseases, including the suspected
Yeah, of
relationship
course.
between smoking and 12 different types of cancer.
Dr. Gundry could tell you that. And he would if you didn't cut him off. Like, what do you want?
The authors actually found that men who smoked cigarettes continuously died about 10 years younger than lifelong non-smokers, while stopping at age 60, 50, 40, or 30 years gained about 3, 6, 9, 10 years of life expectancy, respectively.
Yeah, but that's not the doctors. And so you gotta live with the fact that there is a subset, a subgroup, where something strange is going on. And that's something we should investigate.
Interestingly, on Parkinson's, Dr. Gundry is somewhat correct. There has been some research, including the study he mentioned, that shows smokers tend to have lower rates of Parkinson's disease. But we don't really know why. Even the researchers who analyzed this study wrote very clearly. The findings of the study support the protective effects of tobacco smoking on Parkinson's disease risk. However, the results do not provide a mechanism by which this effect occurs, so
There's plenty of mechanisms well known and established, like mitochondrial decoupling, like testosterone, which is a very bioactive compound, right? That could be in play here. So, of course, the study itself did not investigate the mechanism, so there needs to be further studying, right? But there's plenty possible benefits.
it is premature to assume that there is a direct causative relationship between tobacco use and a reduced risk of Parkinson's disease.
This is why you listen to people who look at pathways and so on, and that makes people over extrapolate the benefits. And by the way, Dr. Steven Gundry is pretty clear that you can get your mitochondrial decoupling from other stuff too. Curious why Dr. Mike isn't picking up on that at all in this conversation, even after the term mitochondrial decoupling was brought up. So that's a bit strange. Is he not interested in getting people good protection against chronic diseases? I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't. Maybe he just has a blind spot, right? And so, strange.
Correlation versus causation. The two things happen simultaneously.
And this is why we have qualitative studies as to do with the compounds in play. And this is Dr. Gundry is very much in that space of qualitative study.
Or do they cause one another to happen? And even Dr. Robert Clark, who published in the medical journal Neurology on the topic, said current smoking is the leading cause of premature death and disability worldwide. And any such...
Another thing that Dr. Mike does here is eminence over empirical evidence, right? I mean, that's a big journal with a big dude. It's like, okay, I mean, he clearly didn't do his homework as an academic on this topic yet. And I sure hope he will do at some point.
hazards would greatly...
Much like I hope that Dr. Steven Gundry is gonna keep updating his sometimes rather outlandish extrapolations from mechanistic qualitative studies. You know, which does happen. That's just how it means to be a scientist. At times, you don't get the good without the bad.
exceed any potential benefits of current smoking on the risk of Parkinson's disease. But Dr. Gundry did also mention a protective effect for dementia, so let's look at Alzheimer's and dementia. I actually wonder if the Alzheimer's Society in the UK answered this question before. Oh yes, they have.
Yes.
What was it?
Society in the UK answered this question before. Dementia. I actually wonder if the Alzheimer's Society in the UK answered
Alzheimer's Society in the UK. Where's your own homework? I'm not saying you have to do your own homework on everything, but this is just not very convincing, you know? And how much do you know about the American Heart Association? I mean, I'll just say there's a bit of a story there with, updating the guidelines as of recent and dropping certain things, like there's no more recommendation against saturated fat, right? I mean, stuff like that. It just happens, you know? For decades, it's like, oh, saturated fat is bad. And then suddenly, oh yeah, you can have your butter. It's okay. There's actually no indication that it's bad. It's like, yeah, I mean, they were feeding animals all kinds of crap back in the day, and that stuff gets accumulated in the animal fat, so you would get like a correlation, not a causation, and it would still creep into these associations guidelines as something much more broad. So don't tell me this is just a Dr. Gundry problem. No, it's a Dr. Mike problem. It's a medical association problem. It's a problem for everyone, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to these. It's just the best working theory we have, given the knowledge of like 20 years ago, or maybe even longer ago in certain cases. And then we also can listen around to people who do work with the mechanistic studies, who bring their own biases to the table, their own extrapolations that may not check out. Sure, I have my autoimmune issues, Dr. Gundry does too, I understand. You gotta understand the biases of the sources you listen to, right? I'm not saying you can't listen to TV channel news. It's like, you just gotta know there's some biases here, right? I mean, that's just how it goes.
answered this question before. Oh yes, they have.
Yes, science.
Okay, maybe that's only one source. Let's ask the folks at Alzheimer's Research UK. They write a recent review of 37
Alzheimer's Research UK. Is this one of these groups that have continued to fail for decades and decades to deliver us any sort of progress in the research of Alzheimer's? Is this like the people with the misfolded protein theory?
research studies found that compared to never smokers, current smokers were 40% more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. It's pretty clear that smoking doesn't help and really can increase the risk of Alzheimer's. But what about dementia? Well, a 2019 Lancet commission that was actually focused on dementia prevention ended up ranking smoking as third among 9 modifiable risk factors.
Dr. Mike, I think he's totally sincere, but he's clearly got the wrong idea about Dr. Steven Gundry, is what I get from this video. But I don't doubt his sincerity. Sincerity is overrated, as the great Professor Steve Keen said in one interview.
For developing dementia. Look, all this is to say smoking is not healthy, and it's actually cut millions of lives short. It should not be glamorized, and any potential associations with benefit cannot be used as a rationale for smoking.
And Dr. Steven Gundry, I'm pretty sure from my memory, which may be a bit flaky, but I'm pretty sure he did not do that. And if it did come off as him doing it, it may be down to you interrupting and not letting him explain how he's actually totally against smoking. You know what I mean?
At best, it could be used for studying mechanisms of disease and improving the search for new treatments. Clearly, Dr. Gundry does not agree with me.
And I don't like when you make statements like that, good sir, Dr. Mike. I don't like it at all. This is where I was like, I actually have to react to this. It's like, this is, that's just not the impression I got at all from the vid that I watched. And from the Dr. Gundry I've been watching here and there.
He also may not want you to know that, given that after I posted that clip on Instagram, his team immediately sent us a cease and desist to take down that clip. They said,
Dr. Steven Gundry, if you just let him explain, he's gonna be like, yeah, of course I'm not for people smoking. Of course not. I have no doubt in my mind that if you let the conversation go where Dr. Gundry wants it to go, that's gonna be what he's gonna say.
Something along the lines of, we made it look like he recommends smoking. Let's be clear. Dr. Gundry doesn't recommend smoking, but it's fairly clear he believes some live long lives because they smoke. I hope the information I just provided made it.
There's plenty ways to go about things that don't involve smoking and optimizing your health. And Dr. Gundry, I'm almost certain that he agrees. You know what I mean?
Clear that's not true. What a mess. I hope the takeaway from a situation like this for all doctors, especially those on social media, is that it's okay to make a mistake.
That sounds good.
It's okay to misspeak, but it's not okay to double down on misinformation, and certainly not to use the legal system to silence those who
I'm not sure he's doing that.
are only interested in the act.
I mean, it's true though. It's a fair generic point, right? It should not double down on mistakes. But who's doubling down on mistakes here? Maybe you should have asked Dr. Gundry about his position. before making this. I don't know. I feel like one conversation or like one email exchange could have fixed this, and that would have not been a problem. It is absolutely clear in my mind, at least, that Dr. Mike put out a disingenuously produced short clip of a conversation, a much longer, very valuable conversation out there. That was not an appropriate bit to put out there. And he knows it when he thinks about it. Like it is eminently clear that was at the end of the conversation. There was no time. And yeah, Dr. Gundry wants to talk about how this is a curious fact. Curious. And you probably shouldn't smoke, right? I mean, hey, if you want another round of chat, I think Steve Gundry would be more than happy for round 2, Dr. Mike, and I would love to see that.
Accuracy of the information. Despite all this, my battle against misinformation lives on. So click here to check out a YouTube channel that's spreading misinformation about weight loss. As always, stay happy and healthy.
Yeah, same. I always want the best for you, and there's many ways to that. So I like the message, I like the spirit, and yeah, if you wanna be true to his word, I think we deserve a round 2, Dr. Mike and Dr. Gundry. Let's make it happen. And I hope you have a good one. Stay safe out there. Yeah. Rate, comment, subscribe, share, and again, maybe make it happen somehow. Dr. Mike and Dr. Gundry, round 2.